Start a family before it's too late. This applies to men and women, so there are no exceptions here at all. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm getting really sick and tired of viewing all these influencers as role models because they simply aren't. The influencers, and we're talking about the top layer of influencers, they are telling you that you shouldn't start a family for all the different reasons. You've got to work, you're still young, you're too young to start a family, you have other responsibilities in life such as building a business, your top priority must be to establish yourself, your top priority must be to have a great net worth before you start a family. They're putting all these beliefs into your head so you get confused and so that you think it's actually too early for you to start a family. What they actually want to tell you is to not start a family because they just can't do it themselves. They have the mindset that they can do it themselves and they feel obligated to spread the same information across the web, encouraging people to not start a family. And I think that is absolutely ludicrous. And we've just seen in recent days how a top influencer got arrested for different reasons that we don't really want to point out in this video, but he got arrested. And when you looked at that guy, you actually thought that he was some kind of role model. And no doubt millions of people actually perceived him as a role model. They emulated everything that he did, and they thought they did the right thing. Now that they learned that that specific guy was up to no good, for all the different reasons that we don't want to point out in this video, they actually started to think differently again. This is the unfortunate truth of online influencers that just want to put out information potentially because it is so contradictory, right? The information that they're putting out is so contradictory that you think it's something worth following, it's something worth thinking about, it's something worth implementing in your own life. That's what they want to achieve. They want to differentiate themselves from the competition, from other influencers, so that they can get more market share, right? So they can get more reach. And it's been working out fairly well for them. They've been very successful. We can study history for hundreds or even thousands of hours, but we still always come to the same conclusion, that history teaches us certain things that worked very well in the past. And what I wanted to point out here specifically is, of course, spreading fear. The fear spreaders have been extremely successful at pretty much everything they have attempted to do over the past couple of years, right? They've been fairly successful at it. And because they've been so successful at spreading fear, they continue doing it, right? Whatever generates them the most revenue, they just keep doing that. However, we all know that people are driven by fear. Whether you actually believe it or not, that's not important to you. Fear paralyzes you, where you just can't do anything at all, right? Fear really paralyzes you to the essence, where you can't do anything at all. And it's sad because people don't realize it. We have seen that also by certain officials that have been doing very well during the past couple of years. They have all used fear to get people under control. That's what they did very successfully. And it's pretty insane that we don't realize what's actually going on. So I think that the main reason why people aren't having kids has nothing to do with the fact that they believe it's not possible, because that is also really untrue in many ways. The real reason why people aren't having kids is, first of all, the government has gotten in the way of so many things. The government's telling you how you should do things, how you should not do things, right? So the government is definitely one of the main problems that we're seeing right now in certain countries, right? More government control, more government interference is really bad for families, because it dictates you to live a certain way. It dictates you to follow certain standards that you may not want to follow, or that are actually not helping. They're not helpful to people that want to start a family. And that's the unfortunate truth of the current times that we're living in. I totally get that, so I'm not denying that that's not the case. The main reason, though, why people aren't having kids is because influencers are telling you that you can't have kids, that you shouldn't have kids, you should be focusing on your business until you're financially stable, and whatever financially stable means to you, right? It could be just having a full-time income of a couple thousand a month, or it could mean having created a net worth of tens of millions of dollars. Whatever that means, right? Whatever financial stability means in your own terms, that you want to accomplish. And until you haven't accomplished that, chances are you're not going to start a family. And that's really unfortunate, because there shouldn't be such a huge requirement for starting a family these days. The principles are actually still the same, right? The principles are the same, that you, the man, should be the provider. That's how it should be. There are plenty of women out there that are going to be completely happy with you being the provider, with you being the man. That's perfectly fine, because there are women out there that want to play a more traditional role. Of course, there's also many women that don't want to play a traditional role, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not saying that you can't make it work with the latter. You certainly can. However, what I'm trying to say is that you have both options available. You just need to go out there, spend sufficient time in order to find, right, these potential women or men that are out there. And that's really all there is to it. It's just a matter of putting in the work. It is a matter of filtering. And once you have filtered it, it's just a matter of choosing, right? You make the decision who you want to be with, who you not want to be with. People nowadays really have unsustainable goals. They're completely unsustainable and crazy living ideas, right? Crazy living standards that are completely unnecessary. People don't need to have these high standards because what for? At the end of the day, you can't really take anything with you into the grave. Once you're dead, once you passed, the question is what's left. Of course, what's left, you could argue, is your legacy, and the people will remember you for hundreds or even thousands of years. You know how many people are being remembered for thousands of years? Potentially, less than 50 that people really know about. So the chances of you being one of those 50 people are slim to none. No matter how much money you make, chances are people will not remember you hundreds of years or thousands of years later. So there's nothing you can do about that. But what you can do right now is make a difference. Make a difference for yourself. And one of the biggest things that you can implement in order to make a big difference for yourself is to start a family. Starting a family is absolutely mandatory in my humble opinion. It changes you a lot. It changes how you perceive things. It changes your responsibility. It also changes your priorities in life, because once you have people around you, and whatever starting a family means to you, right? Getting married. For some people, it's going even a step further and having children. And that's really, really important. So you can have all of that. And it will change who you are as a person. You will transform, because life is all about change. And circumstances change a person very often, right? There is this quote, circumstances reveal the person to himself. That's perfectly okay. But I also believe that circumstance changes a person. Circumstance changes a person a lot. Whether we want to admit it or not is irrelevant. It definitely is true in many cases. Anyway, what certain influencers are trying to tell you is that you're immoral, right? You're immoral, and that's it. That's the end of the story. You are immoral, even though they're not really telling you as it is, right? They're not speaking very clearly about it, but they're pretty much telling you that in a very deceptive way, that you're immoral, right? That you have low morals, that you have low ethics, and that's why you cannot have a family. That's pretty much the key takeaway that I see every single time that I watch one of their videos. It's not how it should be though. People should be encouraging about starting a family. People should be more insightful, and it shouldn't be like, oh, it's all the woman's fault, right? It's all their fault. It's not our fault. It shouldn't be about, oh, it's the women's fault. It's all their fault. It's not our fault. Well, the truth is that our standards have also become pretty crazy. And we're talking now about men, right? I'm a man, so I'm talking about that. Our standards, our beliefs have also changed a lot. We don't want to admit it, but it's true. It's not just women. Women have changed too, no question about that. And women probably have changed quite a bit more than us over the past couple of decades, and that's perfectly fine. But if you really take a look at history, had we not abused women for so many decades or hundreds of years, right, centuries, then maybe women would have never initiated the first wave of feminism. So you have to see both sides to the story, right? We take a look at how men lived with their women hundreds of years ago. We can definitely see some flaws there. Many flaws. So it's not just their fault, it's our fault too. It's not specifically your fault because you weren't alive back then, but it's our ancestors' fault, and there's nothing that we can do about that. However, we got to live with whatever we have now. We got to play the hand that we're dealt, and we got to make the best out of it. However, I really do believe that our industry leaders, our influencers, they're setting all the wrong standards, and these standards, they aren't really helping you. They are not helping you to build a family. They're actually advising you not to start a family for all the different reasons that they have already mentioned thousands or even millions of times. It's very repetitive, and it gets boring quickly. There isn't really any helpful advice out there, and I think it's time for us to share the things that actually work, not the things that don't work. And despite the fact that we're listening to people that are completely incapable of starting a family because they have issues. People have issues. They're not telling you about their issues, but they're having huge issues. These influencers, they're having huge issues, but they're not telling you about them. They're only telling you about what doesn't work for them, and that you fall in line with them, that you pretty much repeat the process that they have repeated so that they can feel better about themselves. But that is, again, not real leadership. Real leadership is inspiring somebody to become better, not worse. When and only when we're capable of leaving our insane standards behind, our unsustainable living standards, our crazy goals that are completely unnecessary, only when we're able to leave all of that aside, we're actually able to move on to a much more prosperous stage in our life. There are so many things that are completely unnecessary that we don't need on a day-to-day basis. We don't need to have 2 to 3 cars. We don't need that. We absolutely don't need that. We don't need to have 5 pairs of shoes. We also don't need that. We don't need to have electronic devices that don't generate us an income. If they generate us an income, if it's work, then that's completely understandable. However, if it has nothing to do with work, if it's pure entertainment, if it's just for recreational use, then what do we need it for? What do we need it for? It's not really needed, correct? So I think we got to lower our standards. And that is true for both genders. We got to lower our standards, and we got to value different things again. We got to value our commonalities. Right? We got to find common ground. That's very important. We got to do that. We should be able to spend time without spending a lot of money. We should be able to have a good time without spending thousands of dollars on something. We can have all these things, but the fact is we don't need them, right? In fact, we don't need these things. So we need to get into a game that is winnable again. And just because we spend all these hours on Facebook looking at people's yachts, sports cars, looking at their fancy vacation homes, looking at all their materialistic, superficial stuff, it doesn't mean that we are successful ourselves. And just because we are able to acquire those things ourselves also doesn't mean that we're happy. It doesn't mean that. It just means that we have increased our superficial vision, right? That we have achieved certain things. That's what it means. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we are successful people or that we are moral people. And certainly we are not in many cases. And so if you want to learn from somebody how to start a family, first make sure that that person actually has a successful family themselves. Don't learn about dating from somebody who is not good at relationships, right? It's the same thing in business. If you want to learn from somebody how to start a business, how to run a business successfully, you probably want to look at somebody who has ran their business successfully for many, many years. And that's very important, right? If that person has been running his business successfully for many, many years, then that's a person you can actually look up to. That's a person you want to emulate. That's a person that probably has advice that will ultimately benefit you, instead of a person that has never actually achieved anything. And the same also holds true for relationships. And when we take a look at all these high-level influencers, and you think about the advice that they're giving us, and you think like, oh, they must really know what they're talking about. First of all, they have hundreds of thousands or even millions of followers, so you obviously believe that they are popular. You believe that what they're saying is correct, because if it wasn't correct, they wouldn't have all these followers, right? So you're thinking that, right? That's how you rationalize all of that in your brain. However, reality looks very differently. Reality is that oftentimes they don't know what they're talking about, because a person that's online 24/7, they are good at one specific thing. They're good at driving traffic. They're good at telling a story. They're good at marketing, right? But just because they're good at marketing doesn't mean that what comes out of their mouth is actually useful or that it's true. Anyway, this holds true for all types of influencers, right? So I'm not just saying now, okay, you want to start a family, learn from the right person. I mean, I am saying that. However, what I'm also saying is that there are plenty of people out there that are very successful at one particular skill, but the other areas of their life are pretty bad. In fact, they are below average in many other things in life, yet they aren't telling you about that because they feel embarrassed about it. I mean, how can you be great at everything? No person can. No person can, right? So how somebody presents themselves may not be how the person looks inside, right? The person might look very differently inside, but they're not telling you that, and you have to figure that out on your own. Start a family before it's too late. There are so many people out there that have successfully started a family today in this 21st century, so we all know that it's possible. Even though people are telling you that it's not possible, don't listen to them. They probably haven't managed to get it to work themselves, so they don't want you to prosper. They don't want you to have success. They don't want you to have the success that they couldn't have. And that's a very important thing to mention here, because I think oftentimes we look at people and we just think like, oh, they must really know their stuff, because there's so much validation there. Likes, subscribers, views, all kinds of different social metrics. There's all this type of validation, but we don't really know the results of that person. And in fact, the most popular people are very often the most miserable people that you find in life. Very often in business too. In fact, business people, they often don't even trust other business people. They think they're going to rip them off. And you know why they think that? Because they themselves are ripping off other people. The person's ripping off other people, and that's why they think other business people are going to rip them off too. That's their mentality, right? Never trust business people, never trust influencers, unless they want the best for you, right? And they communicate it in a very positive way so that you can actually achieve the results yourself as well. Don't wait too long. Start a family now, before it's too late. So I definitely mean that. There's going to be a time when it's too late for you to start a family. It depends on your goals, of course, but don't wait too long. And especially don't listen to anybody that tells you otherwise, just because they couldn't do it themselves. You know that you can start a family yourself. You know that you can be successful. You know that you can be a good mother, that you can be a good father, that you can create a happy family. You know all of this. You know that you can do it. Don't let influencers tell you that it's not possible, that the government is getting in your way. Just try to look for solutions, not problems. There are plenty of solutions out there, plenty of ways to start a family, and you can make it happen today. Isn't it true that most influencers are good at driving traffic but don't actually know much about the subject they're talking about? What's your opinion about this subject? Leave a comment below and let us know. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'm uploading new videos on digital nomad locations, travel updates, and investment advice several times a week right now. And if you got some more time left, check out these videos. Thank you for watching.